Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the hidden genetic mechanisms behind a super common but widely misunderstood dental issue. We're looking at a fascinating 2026 transcriptomic study from the Journal of Clinical Periodontology. It's a real game changer because it finally answers a question dentists have been debating for literally over a century. So, the specific angle we're investigating today is essentially a medical cold case. Think about it. Can a heavy bite, what dentists call traumatic occlusion, destroy your jawbone all on its own? Or is there an accomplice involved? For the longest time, dental professionals notice this weird pattern. Patients who grind their teeth or just have misaligned bites often suffer from really severe bone loss around those teeth. But the exact biological relationship, well, that was fiercely debated.
Section 1. A century-old mystery, the dental debates. It's amazing how fast science evolves. What started as a really simple physical assumption back in the early 1900s, basically that hitting a tooth too hard literally melts the bone away, was completely challenged by the 1930s and 40s. Then, jump to 1969, and scientists proposed what they called the co-destruction theory. They suggested it wasn't just the bite, but a nasty combination of a bad bite and bacterial plaque. Fast forward to this 2026 study, and we finally have the high-tech tools to prove exactly how this works down at the microscopic molecular level.
This quote right here really sets up our core mystery. It explicitly tells us that physical force doesn't actually start the disease. But, and this is a massive but, if the disease is already present, that physical force makes it so much worse. So the big question is, how exactly does a mechanical, physical force make a biological, bacterial disease that much more destructive? That is the exact mechanism these researchers set out to uncover.
Section 2. The ultimate test, mouse models. To crack this case, the researchers built a perfect lineup of suspects using an absolutely ingenious experiment with 9-week-old male mice. They set up 4 distinct groups to completely isolate the different effects. We've got a control group with perfectly healthy teeth, then a ligature group where they induced gum disease. Next up is a trauma group where they gave the mice an artificially heavy bite. And finally, the lie-tra group. These poor guys received the deadly combination of both periodontitis and bite trauma. Setting up this crime scene required some serious precision. To induce the gum disease, they carefully tied a microscopic 6-0 silk ligature around the molars of the mice to physically trap plaque. And to induce that traumatic bite force, they literally built up the tooth using a tiny drop of composite resin bonding. Yep, the exact same stuff your dentist uses for your fillings. This guaranteed that every single time that mouse bit down, that specific tooth took a heavy, completely unnatural impact. Section 3. Examining the evidence. Physical findings. Just 8 short days. Literally, that is all it took. Only 8 days after the researchers set up these conditions, the physical damage to the bone was starkly, undeniably visible. It happened that fast. The physical proof of this co-destruction theory is just undeniable. The lie-tra group, again, those are the mice with both the gum disease and the trauma, suffered significantly greater bone loss than the group with just gum disease alone. And the tissue staining tells an even crazier story. There are these specialized cells called osteoclasts, and their entire job is to literally eat away at your bone. Well, the lie-tra group had a massive, explosive increase in these bone-eating cells compared to every other group. Section 4. Zooming in on genetics. RNA sequencing. To figure out exactly why that bone melted away so incredibly fast, the researchers brought in the heavy machinery, RNA sequencing. They sequenced the gums, the bone, and the ligaments just 3 days into the experiment. This let them catch the cellular culprits completely red-handed. They could identify exactly which genes were actively firing off instructions to destroy the surrounding tissue. The genetic data here might seem super complex, but the absolutely crucial takeaway is this. Traumatic occlusion predominantly scrambles the gene expression deep in the bone tissue, rather than just up in the gums. We're talking about specific genes going completely into overdrive, triggering massive cascading cellular changes just 72 hours after the trauma started. Section 5. The molecular gasoline, fire and gasoline. This brings us to the core mechanism discovered in this explainer. I like to call it the fire and gasoline effect. Through the RNA sequencing, they proved that a bad bite alone is basically just gasoline sitting safely on the ground. No spark, no problem, and the bone's matrix remains totally stable. But if periodontitis has already started an inflammatory fire, that mechanical stress acts as a hyperpotent accelerant. The physical force is literally altering how those inflamed cells behave. And here is our smoking gun. The data for the LITRA group reveals that genes like MMP3, which is a gene that actively degrades tissue, and IL-11 absolutely skyrocket. But for the trauma-only group, it's barely a blip. Those destructive genes only go totally rogue when trauma and disease are combined. The ultimate takeaway here is kind of mind-blowing. Mechanical force literally alters your DNA's behavioral output. Hitting that tooth too hard during a normal chewing cycle upregulates complex pathways like toll-like receptor signaling and TNF-alpha signaling. But what does that mean in plain English? It means the physical pressure is tricking your immune system into turning on a massive, highly destructive inflammatory response at the molecular level. It literally causes your body to rapidly dissolve its own jawbone. Section 6. The final verdict. Long-term effects. We've seen the short-term destruction, but the researchers needed to be absolutely sure about that trauma-only group. To test this, they left the mice with just the composite resin on their teeth, so just the heavy bite, no gum disease whatsoever, for a full 8 weeks. And remarkably, even after all that time, the bad bite alone never initiated bone loss. The bone height remained perfectly stable, and those genetic markers for inflammation, they stayed completely quiet. So, this definitively solves the century-old mystery. The co-destruction theory is absolutely real, and now we finally have the genetic blueprints to prove it. The good news is, a bad bite will not spontaneously melt your jawbone. However, this perfectly illustrates why fixing a heavy bite or a grinding issue is an absolutely vital step in halting the genetic acceleration of periodontal disease. You just cannot put out the fire if you keep pouring molecular gasoline all over it. I'm going to leave you with this final thought. The next time you're at the dentist and they take out that little piece of blue carbon paper asking you to tap your teeth together to adjust your bite, remember the molecular gasoline effect. They aren't doing it just for your comfort. What hidden, jaw-destroying genetic fires might you be preventing with a simple bite adjustment? Thanks for exploring this fascinating biology with me on this explainer. Keep learning and stay curious.